And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett, the real estate guys, with you today. And thanks for joining us here on KCMX. Joe, got a terrific show today because we've got two exceptional guests who've never been on our show before, but who are going to join us today to talk about real estate. And that's Jeff Golden, right? Jeff is Democrat running for State Senate, and Jessica Gomez, who's a Republican running for the State Senate. This is the seat held by Senator Alan DeBoer, who is not running, right? So we're great to have you guys here.
No, it is, and this will feed.
Thanks for having us.
This will feed Pete's political appetite as he's just warming up for the election season. The years of reporting that he's done in knowledge.
I want to interview you about politics.
Yeah, there you go.
I've changed over the years, I think, as well. Anyway, it's great to have you both here, and I know you're just starting the campaign season. So before we go, just tell me how have you been doing? What's been going on with it as you get going? Because now it's really the next 2 months is it's kind of nitty-gritty time, isn't it now?
Oh, yeah, it's been great. I mean, I've been getting out and talking to so many amazing people. You know, we've been knocking a lot of doors and just being out in the community and getting a sense for what are people really struggling with? Yeah. What are the challenges? What are the amazing things that are happening? We've got some really great ones.
Yeah, so. You too. You're a veteran at this as well, Jeff.
Yeah, that's I've forgotten a lot that I learned over the years. And as you said, things have changed. But Jessica's right about this. What this is supposed to be about is a lot of dialogue, a lot of discovery about what's going on in people's lives. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not supposed to be about great big money. It's not supposed to be about big fancy ad campaigns. It's supposed to be about engaging with people you're asking to represent and finding out what's on their minds. And at this level, I'm not so sure about Congress or above. At this level, that's possible to do, and
it can still happen at the local level.
And it's enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, we began with that. I'm glad you're both out there doing that. And more than anything, because I did this once myself, as you know.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, and I'll never do it again. But I've learned many things over time. But the fact that you both have volunteered to do this and put yourself out there, believe me, you have my and Joe's admiration.
Thank
because
you.
not many people will do that. And so thank goodness that people still believe in that,
Joe,
okay? So I really do appreciate that, you guys
Pete,
doing
that gives us energy, I think, because a lot of people don't have real high views of people who run for office.
I know.
And to say thank you for wanting to serve us means a lot.
Truly does. Okay, well, there's so many things to talk about, Joe. We're trying to think, what should we start with both of them? Can we talk about fires for a second? Since it's in everybody's topic right now. And I look around, our state is burning. We see it happening. And I don't know, it seems to me, are we putting the resources, is our state helping put resources into this thing? Because it's affecting everything.
Well, it's really big
land values on down.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I was talking to a banker this morning, and he said he's got houses that are falling out of escrow now because of the reluctance to be here. People are talking about, can we really afford health-wise to be in the area? And that's a real terrible thing for all of us to have to face.
That's a cause of it. I mean, it's a cause of the fires.
Yeah. Well, the smoke, and it's not even the fire. I mean, it's the smoke, let alone sort of rising potential insurance claims and things like that we're starting to see.
Are we putting them out? I mean, that's my question. Are we putting the resources? Is our state putting the resources that it needs to do this? Because the reason I ask that, it's affecting everything, as you say, Jessica, values, insurances. Let alone what it's doing to the environment. It doesn't seem to me that the state is much involved with this. What do you guys, I mean,
there aren't the resources available. We're not putting it out, and this is one area where we are in a hole that is deeper than it would have been if we'd gotten on the ball 10, 20, 30 years ago. Okay. There's a short-term challenge and a long-term challenge. The short-term challenge is how much fuel is built up in our forests from all those years of Smokey the Bear fire suppression, which seemed like a good idea at the time, but broke the natural cycle of forestry. And also bad logging practices in the past. So we really haven't dealt with that. We haven't wanted to go to work in the woods unless there were big, valuable logs to pay for it. So we kind of, the chickens are kind of coming home to roost on that. And I really very strongly feel the longer-term challenge is what's going on with the climate. We're seeing climate chaos everywhere in the country, pretty much everywhere in the globe. In the western United States, the most common form is drought, greater heat, and our forests are parched. So what was a controllable file 5-10 years ago isn't anymore.
But what role does the state play in this? Does the state have a role to play? I remember back in the day when we were covering fires, Joe, we used to see trucks and planes and stuff, I mean, running all the time to these fires. And I don't see it today. What do you think, Jessica?
Well, I mean, I think there's a debate going on about how to address this, right? Because once we get into a situation where we are right now, it becomes very expensive. I mean, it used to be that, again, like Jeff was saying, that we were able to afford to clear out some of the underbrush and do some logging, and that ended, and we ended up with fire suppression, which allowed a lot of this sort of overgrowth of the forest, and now we're back to a situation where we now have to address it.
But that's on federal land, right?
Part
Isn't that federal land that those big problems are, not state land? It's as much or private lands?
We have 3 different agencies that manage land, right? We have our forest land, then we have the ONC land, which is the Bureau of Land Management, and then we have private, right? It's 64%, 22%, and then about 12% private. Okay. And so when we look at tree harvesting as a renewable resource, we have tree farms, right, that are sort of dealt with a little differently than what you would see in a forest, a biodiverse forest, and then ONC land. So there are slightly different challenges with managing those 3 different areas, and also 3 different agencies or 3 different areas that have to now come together and manage through that.
Well, they're not doing a very good job of it, in my opinion, right?
Well, to your point, Pete, about how we used to see so many more resources deployed, the summers you and I remember, and there have been some big fires in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'd be a big fire, maybe 2. Some summers, none. This fire season started seriously. I think the first big fire was in May this year. And we're in September. We just had a new one break out yesterday. We're probably not done. Hope I'm wrong about that. So what used to be a 1-month fire season that wouldn't even happen some summers is a 5 or 6 month season. And we got firefighters and equipment deployed all everywhere over the West. And we have not geared up to address that.
No, and it's a perfect storm. It's the practices of the past, and it's also the climate, and it's also just the nature of the beast right now is like nothing we've seen. Silver Fire, 87. The Biscuit Fire, 10 years later. The big gaps between what we've seen and now every year we have so many fires so far around us. The wind changes, it clears for a few days, and then the fire blows in from another place. So it's really a different game. And resources, the state doesn't have the resources to come close to deal with this. Neither does California, and the federal government is
Well, the more often
not yet able to.
The more often it happens, the more expensive it is, and then it becomes a year-over-year problem. And cumulatively, it's very difficult.
New fire
fighting. Whichever one of you is going to sit in Salem in January, this is going to come up because we can't continue to burn the way we are. In the state of Oregon, doesn't seem to be. I'm just my opinion of it. Doesn't seem to be as engaged as they should. It's on federal land. It's their responsibility kind of thing. Anyway, so that's kind of where. But part of the reason also, and then I'll get off this. We build in the interface. We keep building more and more homes into the forest interfaces, and we wonder why 1,000 of them burn in Redding. That kind of thing. We just keep doing that.
We love living in the trees, don't we? Everybody does. That's our charm in the Northwest. But then, whether it's that or whether it's rebuilding in flood areas, once homes get wiped out, we really have to question whether we want to rebuild in the same area again and sign up once again for the same.
It reminds me of living. It reminds me of living on the Gulf Coast, where the hurricanes come. You're going to keep building there, and there are going to be more hurricanes. Same way here. We're going to have fire. It's a dangerous thing. People can't get fire insurance. We have a show on that coming up at the end of the month. It's really created a lot of problems for a whole lot of people, and it's affecting the real estate values and sales. We're seeing it all over. Prices have really stopped going up.
And it's become a critical issue now. And the state legislature is looking at that. I spent some time working in Salem in February, and we have now a fire caucus that is meeting. It's bipartisan, and we're looking at how do we handle these issues? Let's get a really good understanding about what the connections are and how we work together to solve some of these big fire and smoke issues that are affecting our communities.
A very big fan would help somewhere over in Jackson County.
Economic development is affected by this as well. It discourages residents and businesses from wanting to move here.
Well, as we go today, we're talking, by the way, with Jeff Golden and Jessica Gomez. They're both running for the state Senate from Oregon, obviously. It's a seat held by Senator Alan DeBoer, who's not running. So they've joined us here today talking about some of these issues. I cannot, we have to talk about marijuana. I just, it's one of the, Joe and I on our show, we have talked about this at some seems like ad nauseum, but it's affecting so many things. I mean, 2 years ago it was like a land rush, gold rush, here, green rush, whatever you wanted to call it.
That bubble kind of popped.
That bubble has done popped, and yet the state of Oregon has a role to play in this thing, and I think they're doing a terrible job. I don't know what your opinion. I'd like to know your opinions, I guess, on what you think of the OLCC's regulation of this thing, because it's affected real estate everywhere, and I don't know what they're doing. I'm curious as to what you feel or what you're hearing and what you guys think about that.
Well, it came on so fast. There was so much accumulated fortune hunting around cannabis, and then when it became legal, just exploded. We've got, some of the pressure is off because that bubble burst, but we still got problems. And one of the things we saw was huge money coming from out of state that made that spiked up rural land prices like crazy, and great big industrial sized grows that hurt water systems.
But we didn't vote for those. See, this is the thing, Jeff. People didn't vote for these industrial grows of 55-acre marijuana plantations.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I really feel like one of the things that we should have done was take a look at how many licenses we were issuing at one time and where the people were coming from. Because people who grew up here that understand that industry would never have implemented some of these grows, right? We have people that are covering acres of land with blacktop and then growing in raised beds. I mean, it's not a sustainable, responsible way of farming.
Okay, and water. I mean, you have an issue, I know, Jeff. The water that you use for this.
Well, that would have been an issue anyway, but this aggravated it. And it's right. We've got local people who've been here for years who've gone into cannabis and who care about the ecology of their neighborhoods, their water, pesticide use, rodenticide, which is showing up all over the place. And then there are corporate folks from very far away who just don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. But there are now organizations, there's something called the Sun Growers Guild, which is smaller local growers from all over the state who are really getting together to tackle some of these problems. One of the problems that isn't environmental is financial, which is because it's still a federally banned substance. No bank or credit union can handle the money. And there's ways.
In-state credit unions can do that.
There's one in Salem.
Okay, they are getting some of that coming. So that's good.
But I think maybe this is a talk for another show. We need a state bank of Oregon that could do a whole number of things.
You got to do something. The sheriff sat here 2 weeks ago talking about all the money that's loose out there, the cash that's out there.
The banking system. We have to have a solution.
So one of you are going to be dealing with this in Salem. I mean, this is going to come up. You got to deal with this.
Yeah.
It has to be somehow resolved.
I'll give you the initials of who it's going to be. It's going to be JG.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I noticed that both of you had the same. We got a break coming up here, so I don't want to go off that topic yet because it's still fascinating to me what's happening with it. And again, you're going to be dealing with this. Yeah. That's for sure, and it's got to be done better than the way the OLCC has done it. I don't care if they're adding 6 more detectives here. The cat is long. That horse has long left the barn. We got a break coming up. We're with Jessica Gomez and Jeff Golden here on the Real Estate Show. We're coming right back after this. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show here on KCMX News Media 880. Pete and Joe, the real estate guys, with you. Don't forget you can check out any of our past shows at realestateShowOregon.com. Next week here on the show, we're going to talk about brownfields, which is how you deal with contaminated properties. And you wouldn't think that's a big issue? Geez, like everything, it's there's a lot more to it than you think. That show will be presented by the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors next week. Today here on the show, we're with Jeff Golden, who's a Democrat running for State Senate, along with Jessica Gomez, who's a Republican running for State Senate. This is kind of a first appearance as the campaign kind of kicks off between now and November. We're talking real estate with you. Okay, got to go back just to marijuana, then I promise I will get off of it quickly here. You will have to deal with this, no matter, I think, what. And the issues of water, of indoor grows, with the amount of energy used. To me, they're incompatible with our values of wise use of resources, the chemicals used in indoor grows, the energy used in grows. Thank goodness that the people of Ashland rose up against that indoor grow that was going to go into the Plexus building. That's incompatible with our values here. So those are the things that are out there and that you're going to have to still kind of deal with.
Well, it's become prolific. I mean, we have way too much production of marijuana than what our region can really realistically deal with, right? And we know that about 80% of that is.
Do you think the
state.
legislature could actually deal with something and actually limit this or get this thing under control? Is that going to be?
I mean, we have to look at it. It's inevitable. We're going to have to address the issue.
The market's doing some of that, and clearly there are big problems. I think having to do with the speed with which it came on and the amount of money that came on. But we can steal best practices from other states. A lot of states are learning a lot about this. And I want to just get a little bit more optimistic for a minute. There is a ton of money and economic opportunity here. And I know people feel differently about marijuana. I know there's, I think the health problems with it have been blown out of proportion compared to, say, alcohol. But nevertheless, there are issues, especially with kids. Absolutely true.
Sure.
And of course, pot is still not legal for minors in this state. But we're interested in family wage jobs, and we'd be foolish, looking at how the world is changing with regard to cannabis. We would be foolish to just say, it's just contradicts all our values. We want to see what we can do to stamp it out. We want to look to see what long-term, sustainably, what's available in terms of family wage employment area.
I agree with you. Okay.
Yeah, there is a lot of auxiliary part of this industry that's coming up too. It's not just farming, right? There's other sort of things that are happening as part of the industry that's supportive. The products, you have equipment being specially sort of engineered to go through the process, and lots of other really interesting parts of the industry that I think could be really positive.
And terrific potential with hemp.
And we see a lot of work. We've seen a lot of regular marijuana grows turned into organic hemp. I think I've seen those now a lot. So I hope that
might be a sounder economic path for
It's more of an agriculture deal. It's perfect for that. We got the best growing place in the world, and they grow it outside.
Oh, we're set up for it, right? I mean, we have a lot of great agricultural lands, and I think there is potential there, but we have to be careful about how we manage through those issues.
Let's
our counties are left with managing the problems. One of the other biggest problems is the neighborly issue of how you affect the livelihood, the living quality of your neighbors. And Sheriff Sickler was on 2 weeks ago. We had a good discussion on that.
Big deal.
A lot of that's probably going to happen locally, but gosh, if we could get some reprieve for these folks that have just had to pretty much just sell and move to maintain the quality of life that that was their
talk
dream.
About real estate. I mean, you have one neighbor that thinks their property is worth X, and then the next neighbor thinks their property is worth nothing. Right? So how do you reconcile that? Right?
Yeah, that's a tough comp. It really is.
It's made a difference. Let me change the subject to real estate and taxes, because one of the things I think we've learned in 10 years of doing this show is that real estate's an easy thing to tax or want to tax. Transactions, mortgage industry. We're seeing some
transaction taxes.
Lots of that stuff. I know OAR, the Oregon Association of Realtors, they go on nutty cases when these things come up. I'm curious as to what you guys think of that. Any thoughts on that? It's kind of been beat down. I'm just curious as to.
You're not talking right now about property taxes.
Not property. Not property. No, that's a whole.
You're talking about the fees and all the things sort of attached to the potential transactional fees and whatnot. I mean,
do you hear any about that at all, you guys?
I hear a lot about property taxes from people. But they're not realtors necessarily.
No, and when you hear property tax, people are really talking about the 3% increase, right? When you hear that mostly.
Well, some of that, basically, that when they compare to friends in other states, it's surely high. Now, those other states have sales taxes.
Right. Yes.
So we've got the two-legged stool where others get three-legged stool. Yeah. But there are people who are saying, retired, fixed income people, older people who are saying, dang, is this getting rough? Can you do something about that?
I think the rate at which taxes are raised, across the board, and you're talking about some of the fees that we've seen implemented over the course of the last, 2 to 4 years, even longer than that. People who are on a fixed income are now starting to really struggle with how are they going to continue to afford the rising cost.
It costs.
The Southern Oregon Builders Association, that is a key issue with them. The cost of governmental regulation and the cost per square foot of their housing that goes up incrementally with every government regulation and trying to meet their margins and trying to provide us affordable housing, which are two really hard goals to find the happy ground between them.
Talking about systems development charges, those kinds of things?
Those and just the legislative, there are green energy. There are energy regulations. Brad Bennington could speak more
cost-
eloquently. Yeah,
I think
the cost.
just saying the added cost to a new construction of government regulations on it, something like $24,000 or $25,000.
And as the economy has ticked up
per home.
Well, and it's not one thing. It's the
those costs
accumulation of, one small thing after another that really starts to add up for people that are not seeing their incomes rise at the same level. And maybe they're stuck. Maybe they're retired, or and it becomes a real issue for them.
Well, that brings us to a point of being able to look at affordable housing and how are we going to solve this issue. We get here every week. We hear nothing but problems with. People can't get into homes. What are we building? Where are we going? Government's role, state's role. I'm curious again here. There's so much of it here. What do you think?
You've gotten to the biggest problem we've got here.
It is a terrible problem.
And it's I knew it was serious before I got in this. It is a scourge, and it is showing up all over
everywhere.
The place. One figure I just heard last week, and this is from the Maslow Project, a local group that does fabulous work with homeless teens. Guess for a second, Jackson County has about 210,000 people. Guess what the best estimate from government sources is last year of the number of homeless children ages 3 to 21 in Jackson County, out of a county of 210,000. What would you guess the number is?
A couple thousand?
It's 2,500.
2,500.
2,500 kids out there who do not sleep in the same place every night. Some are under bridges, others are couch surfing. There's some in motels now and then. And think about how that radiates out to our other problems, and think about how those kids arrive at school and how ready they are to learn, and how well nourished they are.
How can housing help this? I mean, what are we doing? I mean, we're at this point with housing. Where do we go with these kids? What do we do with them?
Yeah, we have a really big generational poverty issue here, right? So there's a couple things that are going on simultaneously, and we have costs that are rising. We need inventory. I mean, rents are high, right? Because the less available housing that you have, the higher the cost.
But you have to have, just stop me this way. Don't you have to have some sort of incentive, though, to do it? I mean, the state has to have some incentives for developers or builders to do something, because they're not doing it.
Part of what our constraints were was we were at the sort of point of where we really need to start looking at the urban growth boundary, right? Which we did. So now the city of Medford was able to expand its urban growth boundary. And that opens up more flat land. Think about the cost of putting a foundation on a piece of property that's on a steep hill. It's very expensive.
So Medford Joe went east, right, with their urban growth boundary.
Pockets all around.
They went all around,
it's kind of all around, but
but
strategically placed. Of course,
but it's what we're building. That to me is the issue, right?
$400,000 3-2s.
$400,000 homes. I mean, that's
put
fine.
those up one after the other, and
but we need,
and the market needs and demands.
We need tiny houses, small houses that people are needing for
additional dwelling units.
We got nothing going.
Well, I sat on the ad hoc committee for affordable housing that the city of Medford put together in preparation for the last leg of getting that urban growth boundary expanded, and we looked at all of the zoning policies of the city and where can we add those additional units and we have bigger properties in older parts of Medford that really could benefit from being able and allowed to put those auxiliary units there. Thinking about can we put a quadplex in single residential property.
The problem though, Jessica, is that nobody's done any of that.
No,
there's not one development in Medford. Of all the hundreds of homes, there's not one development that's doing anything beyond 3 and 2s.
Not yet.
Is there?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
So there was a series of recommendations that we put forth to City Council.
Okay.
They are going to be assembling a more permanent committee for looking at housing made up of community members.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at making those investments and creating incentives for developing that type of housing.
Medford needs that. What do you think?
And Las Ayala and Ashland is ahead of the game in developing some of that.
I think solving this is going to take about 20 different things. There is no silver bullet. There may be silver buckshot. A lot of
silver buckshot.
And the first thing is, and there may be disagreement on this, I don't believe I'm going to be getting the Realtor PAC's endorsement on this one. But the legislature has been preempted from, or pardon me, has preempted local governments from trying a lot of different things.
Yes.
Now, I'm not here to argue about the pros and cons of rent stabilization,
Okay.
inclusionary zoning,
Sure.
anything else. I see arguments on both sides. What I feel strongly about is that the state needs to get the hell out of the way and let local governments who are living with this problem try what they need to try to get their people under decent roofs. And we're not doing that. You know, I will tell you, I get annoyed at those people who say, you know, the best government is the local government. Let's get the feds and the states out of our face until it's something that they're getting lobbied on, and then say, no, we're not going to let you do that, local government. So first of all, let's end those preemptions and let communities have the tools to do it.
And local groups are following through. We had a show in here with the homeless groups. God, I can't remember the names. They were here a few weeks ago. About what they're doing in Medford and how they're helping solve part of that homeless problem. The same thing you're talking about, the housing commission. It's got to be combinations of things.
The city of Bend was able to really get this done in a quick fashion. I mean, they brought up more affordable housing than anywhere in the state, including Portland. It was pretty incredible. And we sat through a presentation about some of the things.
And Bend was one of the areas, Joe, where they did the partnerships on those apartments. Remember we were talking about the subsidized apartments in Medford versus the private partnerships that were done in Bend as well.
It's pretty innovative.
Huge difference.
And a good model.
I think it's a great model.
And that was where the state had incentives for them. You know,
this is going to be this is an all hands on deck problem. And there's going to be some pain in fixing this thing. I don't want to get all rosy. There's some low hanging fruit, but a lot of that fruit is up higher. And one thing is NIMBY attitudes. Now, you know, there is a small, a tiny house village in Medford, a small one, doing fabulous work.
And they're doing well.
They had a hell of a time citing themselves. And I don't want to get on people's backs. I'm not real anxious for a ton of people to be settling right over my back fence. But we're going to if we care about this and understand that this problem could pull us down into problems we could never afford, we're going to have to re-examine.
We have to help our neighbors along the way. We got a break coming up here. We're with Jeff Golden and Jessica Gomez here on the Real Estate Show. We got a break coming up. We're coming right back for our final segment. Gosh, time is flew away today. We're coming right back after this. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show here on KCMX News Media 880. Pete and Joe, the Real Estate Guys, with you. Thanks for joining us here next week. We'll talk about brownfields, contaminated properties, and what you have to do to remedy that situation. Go try to sell one of those, Joe, and have a contaminated piece of dirt underneath you. That does not work very well.
I'm not happy about septic issues ever, and no one ever is.
Contamination. Anyway, that's next week here on the Real Estate Show. Today, Jeff Golden and Jessica Gomez, they're both running for state senate here from Southern Oregon, and they're with us today talking real estate. So far, we've solved all the problems. You know, we have made it. We have solved the housing affordability.
We've at least identified them.
Pete has not allowed me to get to my list of things to fix in Salem. We'll probably have to hold that for another show.
That might take a whole separate show.
I've got a list.
That would take.
I think we all do. All of us Oregonians see some things we could use to fix.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I think we would all agree that, you know, home ownership is still the number one way to create wealth for a person in this country is home ownership, owning of real estate.
You know, that's how we started our business.
Did you start that way?
Yeah, we. It's pretty interesting. So when Pat and I got married on the East Coast, right? People give money when you get married.
Okay.
And so we had put our entire wedding on our credit card. And we got money, and we got the money. I'm counting this. I'm like, Pat, there's close to $20,000 here. Wow. I'm like, I don't think we should pay off the credit card. I think we should buy a house, and that's what we did.
Started. Yeah.
We bought a house, and we did a remodel. That was just horrific. We slept on the floor, on the dining room floor for 9 months. Put the rug in, together. And 2 months later we sold it, and we took that chunk of money that we made, and we invested it in the company, and that's how it started.
Start your business. Well, I mean, the average homeowner in this country, again, has a worth value over $200,000, and a renter is at $6,000. You know, so that's the difference of what real estate. Why it's such an important thing.
I'm really worried about how high the barrier to entry for people to become homeowners.
Okay.
It was always a challenge, but now after 20, 30 years of everything going up except wages, we've got in this county tens of thousands of hardworking people. who it's just a distant dream.
And rents were so high, rents became just insane here. We have in Jackson County, the average renter pays almost 37% of their wage in rental property.
And
you can afford a house at that rate.
The rule of thumb is
24% is the average across Oregon.
Well,
we're way high here.
Yeah, and we have some amazing programs for first-time home buyers. I was talking to someone. I mean, we have something called the Dream Savers program, which for every $1,000 you can, the state will match you 3 to 1. And so it allows people who are just starting out, who are first-time home buyers, to save enough money for a down payment. Then we have other programs that will allow you to get into a house for, you pay $3,000 for cash.
Down payment on conventional
you can
loans,
get into a house. And we have availability. I mean, they're not... sometimes we look at our average home prices and we say they're high, but there is opportunity for first-time home buyers in a way that I think I haven't seen in a long time, and so I'm excited about that.
And at least the millennials and other groups, younger people, are buying.
They are.
I mean, it's not like all of a sudden that dream has gone out the door. They are out there, and they're definitely
It's a big part of their strategy.
And the demand here. I mean, the demand for housing
from families
is coming not only from people moving here, moving up and down the ladder. People coming here. The problem is no place to go when you're here. Where do you go from here? And that's another problem that's exasperating this whole thing.
Well, can I ask you a question with your expertise? We hear that home builders are, by and large, see more profit and are more attracted to higher end homes.
Sure.
Right. Can that change? And if so, how? Can they be incentivized to get to build more entry level and entry price homes?
That's the number one challenge I think that you see. And yes, we're seeing some of that. We've seen neighborhoods that have mixes of large homes all the way down to tiny homes in the same neighborhoods, just mixed it around there. It can be done. It really can be done, but we're not there yet. But
I think some of the challenges too have to do with our SDC charges.
They are,
right?
and you're both are going to have to deal with this no matter what. So we got to move on. Okay, I got to.
We got it covered, Pete. Don't worry.
You guys take care of that.
And I'll just give you my list to take with you.
There you go. Yep. My list will be growing.
I want to give both Jeff and Jessica a couple of minutes to say whatever they want here, and then because our show's almost over, so I don't know who wants to go for. Jeff, why don't you go first? Just kind of anything you want to say for a couple of minutes here to us.
A couple of things. I'm distressed by how many people I know and talk to who've kind of given up hope on the country, on the state, on the future. And the two of us obviously haven't, or we wouldn't be sitting here. But I don't want to gloss it over. I used to talk in my show, Immense Possibilities, about igniting realistic hope. So we're Oregon. We've done great things before. We can break away and lead much of the nation on innovation. We've done it before. There's great reasons to be optimistic, but let's be realistic too. We have, by disinvesting in a lot of things, in people, in infrastructure, our holes are bigger than they would have been otherwise. And I think if our, I don't want to get too loosey-goosey about this, but I think if our attitude is, how do I protect my interests and make sure I don't give anything else and make others solve this, I don't see much hope. If there is like a resurgence of an Oregon spirit that says we are in this together and we love this state, we want to hand a great state over to our kids and their kids, there's some real possibilities. But it's going to take some collective work and probably some pain because of the depth of those holes. And the last thing I want to say is, yes, it's important who you elect to office. Yes, we want 90 good people in the state legislature. It's not as important as what Oregonians do themselves. So whoever you vote for, whatever you're involved in, get more involved in your community. Work with the nonprofits who have missions you believe in. Stay engaged, because we can't do this as leaders. We have to do this as a movement.
Locality makes a difference. It is absolutely true. Jessica, we'll give you the last kind of couple minutes here.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that exact engagement is what inspires me. I absolutely love our community, and I want to make sure that we're able to reach our full potential. But it's going to take leadership. I mean, we have some significant issues with the way our budget is right now. I'll be committed to really working on education. We're 47th in the nation in graduation rates, right? We have a lot of room to improve, but we have so much going on for us right now. We have Measure 98 money that's coming and flowing into our schools now. We're really starting to get a hang of how do we align our school system with work, right? How do we show kids what is available for them locally? So that's going to be incredible, and I think we have a bright future there. The next thing is really talking about economic diversity. We need a family wage base here. We need to encourage more traded sector industries here. I mean, we lost a lot of our natural resource economy in the late 80s, early 90s, and we haven't fully recovered from that. And there are things that I'll be working on that will help encourage bringing that back so that our young people can stay here, the people that we spend so much time educating can be here. And then the next thing is we're struggling with generational poverty. We have a lot of people that are on our safety net system. If I'm a mom and I have 2 children, the minute I try to go to work, those safety net systems start to drop off. My HUD housing, my child care, my SNAP. We need to realign those systems so that work is always a net positive for people.
I'll tell you one thing. You got your work cut out for you, don't you?
I know.
Both of you do. I mean, there's a lot going on, and it takes leadership, you're right, and ideas. And the biggest thing probably from our point of view, I would think, from you and I, is that whatever you do, we got to work together in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
It's the rancor, it's the hyper partisanship that has just so turned so many people off. And I hope you don't. I hope either one of you, whoever wins it, I hope you don't get involved with that. I hope you don't, because that's just turns people off.
I have such a high level of confidence that Jessica and I can run a campaign. That's what they're supposed to be. An exchange of ideas and qualifications. There have been in this area in the past outside
outside
stay
money,
away, outside advertising. We do not need that. We can do this ourselves.
Stay away from us. Let you guys debate, and people come visit you and talk to you, and that's how we do it. And
we have such a beautiful community. I mean, we don't want that to creep down into what we're doing here.
We're out of time. We got to go.
Thanks so much,
Jeff Golden. Good luck to you, Jessica.
Thank you so
It was
much.
great to have you both here.
Thank you.
That'll do it for the Real Estate Show today. Great guests, great topics. We'll see you next Saturday right back here on the Real Estate Show. In the meantime, God bless you all. We'll see you back next week.